He was the type of politician Canadians felt they knew on a first-name basis. Ed Broadbent first ran for the NDP in 1968. He became leader in 1975. He moved the NDP to the left, and the NDP moved up in the polls. The 1988 election was a campaign fought over free trade, and it pushed Broadbent's NDP to the brink of a breakthrough.
Canadians are not about to build a Canada on the values of John Turner's vision of Bay Street as a replacement for Brian Mulroney's Wall Street.
Opinion polls prior to the election suggested the party was surging. At the time, Broadbent became the most successful NDP leader in history, with 43 seats. But he fell short of his own high hopes. There had been an expectation the NDP would at least become official opposition.
After an election, I sit down and I am with my wife here, and we think of what is good in terms of our personal life, what is good for my party, and what is good for my country.
The next year, Broadbent stepped down as leader.
Ed Broadbent was a giant in the Canadian political scene.
Broadbent faced off against 4 different prime ministers. Brian Mulroney was one of them.
He was dignified, and he was a humanist.
Jean Chrétien recalled working with Broadbent when he was a cabinet minister.
We had tough differences, but it's like playing hockey. You know, you can go to a hockey game and you can bum a guy in the ramp or be bumped after the game. You can have a beer together.
After more than a decade outside of the House of Commons, he was lured back by Jack Layton.
His service to this country was always focused on strengthening communities, on bringing people together and believing in what Canadians were capable of.
He never stopped caring about people, about the movement, and that's a big part of why he is someone that I'll always remember. I am sad today that he has passed.
The NDP continued to turn to Broadbent for advice about the party he devoted so much of his life to. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
Chief Political Correspondent Rosie Barton is here. So, Rosie, one of his final interviews was with you in the fall. What do you remember from that?
Adrienne, we talked a lot about social democracy, his reflections on inequality in this country, how the NDP fits into that fight because of a new book that he contributed to. But he had a couple of interesting reflections about the NDP's attempts to work with the Liberals. First, back in 2008, you remember when he was asked by Jack Layton to reach out to Jean Chrétien about a Liberal-NDP coalition. He saw that as a mistake, in part because it gave Stephen Harper's Conservatives an opening to attack the entire idea of coalitions going forward. And he also thought that the current agreement, the supply and confidence agreement between the Liberals and the NDP, might have been a good idea, but it made it difficult for his old party to claim credit for things like pharmacare and dental care while still criticizing the government ahead of the next election.
And so, Rosie, as we just saw, I mean, Ed Broadbent's legacy includes his influence on so many huge moments in Canadian history.
For sure. But his biggest legacy, Adrienne, is really getting Canadians to consider the NDP as a legitimate, viable option in an election, potentially even government. He believed, yes, that the NDP was the social conscience of Parliament, but he also believed that wasn't enough, that this party should form government one day. And fundamentally, he still believed that Canada should have been further along with things like housing, fighting child poverty and equality. This is some of what he told me about that back in October.
So it's not what the country I thought when my early years in politics would be. I thought we would have more equality when we built the welfare state. But in fact, we've had less equality. We've had tax on the equality measures. So it's challenging right now.
He was still fighting for that equality up until the end. We're going to talk more about Broadbent, what he did for the NDP and for Canada coming up on At Issue.
All right, see you soon, Rosie.